everyone. My name is Marty Balkema, and I'm looking forward to talking to you today more about planning the post-launch investment in digital products. Many of us are building and launching one or more digital products, probably currently or we're about to. Some of us are doing this for B2C audiences, B2B audiences, or even internal audiences. In any case, I think the ideas that we'll talk about today will help you plan your post-launch investment. A little bit about myself. I'm a co-founder and CEO and Director of Customer Success at LOFT. And LOFT is headquartered in Greensboro and focused on supporting digital products after launch. We are reinventing software support by focusing on providing peace of mind and freeing up time and resources so our customers can focus on the highest value activities. We provide monthly support through subscription-based support and maintenance plans for all sorts of digital products, apps, and websites. My personal background is I have a background in software engineering. Most of my experience has been in B2B and manufacturing environments. In recent years, I've co-founded and invested in several digital products or service companies. And my focus is generally around operational success, resource allocation, and execution of strategic plans. This is probably a question that many of you have seen before or heard before from someone, stakeholders or executives, or maybe you're the one asking this question. But most of the time when this question gets asked in regards to a digital product, they're asking it about the 0 to 1, the build of the product, right? And often we don't think enough about the full investment of software after launch. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. A wise former vice president I used to work for used to answer this question with, it'll take all of the money and all of the time that you want to give it. And I've found, like I'm sure many of you, that is the nature of software. And so today we're going to have fun diving in and reminding ourselves of all of the important aspects we should plan to invest in after we launch a product. And there's nothing really new about what I'm going to share with you today. I think most of this is common sense, but my hope is that I can provide an organized list of the areas to be thinking about for post-launch investment, and maybe some thoughts about the mindset that we've found to be successul. When a new software product is launched, it's not necessarily done. In fact, it's a milestone within the whole product life cycle where the product is delivered to users. And so we should plan on continuing investment in the application post-launch. In fact, the milestone of launch is really just the beginning of the most important benefit of launching, is really learning what users really need. We make a lot of assumptions and make a lot of hypotheses, but when we launch something, we find out what users really need. I like this visual because your product is not a fake plant, right? It's not a rubber plant or a plastic plant. It's a living, breathing thing, and it's going to need ongoing care and feeding. You know, the other thing that's interesting from a mindset standpoint is really the hardest thing in digital products is building the right thing to solve the right problem. And I think the challenge of digital products is more complicated when you realize that when you launch something, it might not even be the right thing quite yet. And so having that mindset of learning and being ready to adapt, I think is a mindset that I'll try to take us through today. So let's jump in. There's 4 areas I want to talk about today for the areas of investment. One is onboarding adoption, another is user support, another is engineering support, and finally, we'll talk about product management. These 4 areas to consider, keeping that mindset of what are the problems the users have, and is this digital product solving those problems in the best way? This is a different mindset than traditional IT operations and in regards to supporting software. And so I think a focus on supporting products is different than a focus on supporting software systems traditionally. And so let's dive in. Number 1, onboarding and adoption. So we've just launched a digital product. How are we going to get that to users, onboarding, and how are we going to get the users to buy into it and use it? What is our approach to that? What resources do we need to find success with onboarding and adoption? I think it's, again, I've said this several times and I'll probably say it several more, but I think it's important to have a mindset that we're still learning. Investing in the onboarding adoption with learning in mind is critical. And I think that understanding that, you'll have more and more success, especially today when we're comparing ourselves to others, right? So today we have so many more examples and so many more years of examples of other digital products that we interact with as consumers and businesses every day. We compare ourselves to all the big names and we study their cultures and we study their processes, and we forget that they probably started in a much different place than the place they were when we started studying them. I have, all of these actually have really good examples, but I love talking to people about, the example of Uber or Airbnb. When Uber launched, it was inventing a brand new thing, solving an old thing in a new way, right? And so, when Uber launched, they figured out where there would be large events happening and where transportation would be limited. So the taxi cabs were too busy and people couldn't find them. So all they did when they started was they created an app that allowed for scheduling and payment of a ride. And then behind the scenes, they would manually call a town car service or black car service and arrange that for those customers to get picked up. But the idea is they had a plan for getting their product out into the marketplace, and they realized that they were still learning, so that the learnings from those experiences could help them invest their money a lot more wisely, their resources, and focus on what is the real problem to solve. Similarly, Airbnb is called Airbnb because it started out as air mattresses and a hot meal. And people would open up their apartment or their home in large cities where there was large events and limited hotel availability. People would blow up an air mattress, put it in the living room, and offer a hot meal. And both of these examples, these companies were building products and they were validating a lot of assumptions before they went on to build what we have enjoyed these products to be. And so I think that as we get into this concept of investing in onboarding and adoption, let's keep these examples in mind. Another thing to think about in investing in onboarding and adoption is around creating a process, creating an onboarding funnel and focus on understanding customer goals. And so having a way to interact with new customers as they sign up or get registered or use your app and really get to know them, either in calls or conference calls or in person. Figure out what the customer's goals is. Why did they choose your digital product? And what do they hope to accomplish? Clearly defining and therefore you can measure what customers expect to accomplish. Why did they choose this and what do they expect to accomplish? And then try to help create a plan for them to have success to achieve those goals. And also just outlining how you will work with them, how your company will work with them to achieve their goals is important. I think that the focus really needs to be on your users during onboarding. Don't be afraid to have a high touch approach. It's not so much about, well, our onboarding process says we've got to get people through the process in 7 days or 30 days or whatever. It's really about creating a relationship with them, like any other kind of product, knowing that you care about what the goals are that they want to accomplish. And, you might have to have a high touch approach. Don't be afraid to do that. Phone calls, screen shares, or even in-person handshake visits. You might need to help your users with some manual effort, right? Maybe helping them with some data migration, helping them with some setup or configuration, helping them with unique organization or data structure, integrations, product training. I love a story about a CEO and founder named Nathan Barry. He founded a product called ConvertKit. And he realized pretty quickly that his number one hurdle or number one roadblock for his customers getting fully onboarding, enjoying all the features of his application was just change, right? It's hard to change. You have a habit of using tools and you just keep using them. So in his case, people were using his competitor tools like maybe a MailChimp, for example. And so he started looking at the lifetime value of having a customer fully engaged. And he realized that if he would handhold a little bit in the beginning, he could help customers fully get onboarded and create that kind of white glove concierge experience. So he started offering free concierge data migration services. And you can read on his blog about the ROI on being willing to make that investment early on in onboarding. Another investment in onboarding is around team members, a customer success team, a customer success manager. So typically a customer success team can manage your company's understanding of your customers and your partners with all of the other teams involved in the product and around product management. Typically a CSM is in the best and a unique position of being in constant contact with the customers, and as a result probably knows them better than anybody on your team. If you're able to staff this position or this team, it'll pay off. They have such a strong understanding of the customer's goals. They've taken them through onboarding. They understand any roadblocks, and they can figure out how the company can provide more and more value. Sometimes when new customers knock on the support team's door, which we'll talk about in a little bit, they don't always know what they need, and sometimes they abandon ship. And I think if you have a customer success team in place where they have a relationship with the customer, they're able to really be that point of contact for the customer. They know their goals, they know what the product can do, and they can help navigate your company. The other thing is having a customer success team really can influence the decisions across the organization and shape the ideal customer profile. They can optimize the pricing model. They can help be a voice into determining what features are useful and what features don't exist that could. And overall, I think the customer success team needs to really translate the customer's voice and then spread those insights into your company. And so it's a key area for investment. Some other additional areas for onboarding and adoption that you can invest in are first-time user experience. So for example, just being thoughtful about the experience a brand new user has when they sign up for your app and use it for the first time. Be very intentional about the first X amount of logins. Be very intentional about the first X amount of days that they're using your product. Is there possibly an opportunity to have a special onboarding UI that exists that maybe somebody can hide once they don't think they need it anymore? We're seeing more and more tours and tips and things like that. Possibly do they get starter data or templates or just some seed data to help not to have a blank app when they start and understand how to use it. Another area is professional services. Depending on the complexity of your digital product and the level of integration required, very often especially in B2B scenarios, there might be a need for professional services. So actually have a custom implementations team that follows their standard process in order to get people onboarded. The other thing is I would invest in or consider investing in the ability to measure success of onboarding. So after the launch of an application, deciding what success looks like, first of all, of somebody getting onboarded. What are the key metrics that we know that things are going well or not with the onboarding? And there's a lot of tools that you can use today. But the biggest thing is just having some sense of what success looks like and then measure it and keep it forefront of your mind. Finally, I'm a big fan of simple communication. So this could even be a little bit before launch, but thinking through and what your communication plan needs to be, preparing the world for this new app or this new tool, evangelizing the problems that it'll solve more than anything. Is this a new app? Is this a new version? Is it a set of new features that's getting released? But really marketing the value of those things. Really explaining that, what they can expect after they sign up. So, having a drip campaign of, thank you for being a customer. Here's a little bit more about what to expect. And then taking them through either event-driven things so that they've gotten past certain hurdles in the process of onboarding, or maybe it's a timing thing, but just thinking through, putting a little bit of thought into having a communications plan after launch. I think the key there is to think of it about how it benefits them, and not having those communications be like check-in emails, but having them actually enriching the process and helping them. While they don't have to be, it doesn't have to be long, being in a good piece of content. So next, we're going to talk about user support. There is some different areas we think are important to think about for user support. And this is always different for everybody, right? User support could be one person or a part-time person. It really depends on the nature of your app. Consider the complexity of the product, right? Is it a complex UI, data model, a complex business domain and business logic? Are there integrations to other systems? The more complex it is, the more likely there are that users will have questions or issues or tickets, etc. And so being able to have a team or a person ready to respond to those things to help those users is very important. Consider obviously how savvy your user base is with devices and software. And also just consider, when you're thinking about your support team, what are the SLA's expectations, right? Does the team that you're putting on the product have enough bandwidth and training to meet these expectations? Are they too busy on other things? That'll affect the response times. Do we need to support them outside of normal business hours? Is there a global or other multiple time zone considerations? And then finally, a language, do we have to support people in different languages? So those are all things to think about when you're thinking about a support team. There's also investments you can make into support technology. So the simple one was just having a support email address. Sometimes people don't think about that, but it's just as simple as getting that set up. Obviously, then we can talk about help desk ticketing systems, live chat, self-service support, portals and knowledge base articles. All of that kind of tech are ways or things to think about to support your users. And then finally, user support content. I think that this is a good ROI, and you don't have to go overboard, but really it's about starting small and then evolving it over time, right? Some training videos, some getting started, some knowledge base or FAQs. Just set a goal to have 5 to 10 FAQs ready to go in a support email address, for example. But these are all things to think about after you launch a new app. Number 3 is engineering support. So obviously, once you put a new product like this out into the world, there are opportunities for there to be issues, right? Software will always have different issues for whatever reason. You should just plan on that. And, if it's a new launch, I would say you should plan on a spike of these issues. You can do as much testing as you want, but it's our experience that first, 30 to 90 days, there's this like hyper support time where there needs to be some technical people on standby to be able to look into and dive into issues. Sometimes these might be the same team members as these engineering support folks, could be the same user support people we talked about previously. And sometimes they're not, right? Sometimes these are, depending on your organization, your product, they could be different folks, but definitely be prepared for doing some bugs and issues and troubleshooting work. Next, there could be changes, right? With real users now using your product, you'll start to think differently about existing features. There will be ideas and ways to not build entirely new features, but just change or tweak the way the application is working when you launched it. And so you want to keep looking at your adoption and onboarding metrics to help kind of make some data-driven decisions about what changes to make. And then obviously we could have new features. I would definitely have a plan for, investing in new features as they come up. It's natural after launch to have, once you have real users on the platform, you'll learn new information that'll justify new features, and you need a plan to handle that. Finally, DevOps. So development operations, these folks are super important to manage the operations of software. in development and production environments, things like continuous integration and cloud infrastructure. DevOps may also provide advanced monitoring solutions that could help pinpoint application or data level opportunities for improvements that users don't even see. But as you get more and more users on the system, you might be able to be proactive in monitoring at an advanced level. And so DevOps folks can help with that. And in either case, I think one of the most important things about thinking through the engineering team post-launch, which is different than the team, doesn't have to be different people, but it's a little bit different process, a little bit different mindset from the people that built the application. I think collaboration is the word that I think of so often. And really the relationship between the engineering team, the support team, and the product management team, and the customer success team. In big environments, it's key to have those people working in lockstep. In small environments, even where people are wearing multiple hats, it's super important that these people are working together. There's a lot of different streams of work, from answering help desk tickets to onboarding new customers, to bug fixes, changes, new features, execution of the roadmap, all of these things. There needs to be a well-defined process about how these teams work together, how they prioritize the work, and really just work in concert with one another. I think, managing the bandwidth, if they are the same people wearing multiple hats, is something to really pay attention to as the volume of support grows. And really have like a product roadmap driven resource plan, I think is super important, because you got to balance the focus on the roadmap with the focus on being responsive to users. Finally, we'll talk about product management. So I think that having a product manager or a product management team, depending on your environment, is super important. I think that someone to lead both product prioritization and roadmap that results in meeting the needs of the customer and balancing the strategic drivers of the application with of the company. So balancing the company's reason for having the application and the ROI that they intend to get out of it with the voice of the customer. Somebody has to do that. And if that's not happening, it's hard to say where the product will go. So I just think it's about leadership, and I think that having someone, whether it's their part-time gig and they've got other roles in the company, or it's a full-time position, I think this is it's easy to leave this out, but I think it's super important to designate somebody the product manager and give them responsibility. I would argue it's the most expensive in opportunity cost mistake that I see, is a lack of investment in product management. In the beginning, a good product manager can fill a lot of roles, as we mentioned above. It doesn't have to be a separate person than some of the things we've mentioned above. So what does a product manager do? At a high level, I think that they are someone who is focused on problems versus solutions. So I think that they're focused on what problems are we solving versus the adoption of the current solution, because then they can always compare whether our solution is the right one for the product. I think they're focused on growing activation and adoption, and they're looking at those metrics and they're trying to figure out how to improve that. They're obviously prioritizing their limited resources, and they're allocating the right people to work on the right things given the investment constraints. I think they're also focusing on the long-term value and retention. An eye on the lifetime value of having this customer on is super important. Customer satisfaction in regards to retention. I also think that they have to be really good at synthesizing a lot of signals coming from all over the place and synthesizing that into roadmaps and plans and resource needs as well. And finally, it's critical for a product manager to understand the voice of the customer and really collaborate with customer success and onboarding teams. I can't emphasize enough that good product manager knows a whole lot about the problem we're solving versus just focusing on the solution we're supporting. So I'll kind of wrap up here as we wind down. A few thoughts as I close here is, number one is it takes a long time for a product to reach maintenance mode. And so I think it's important to determine the right level and the right type of investment required for your product. I went over a lot of things today, and I think that the key point is you're going to have some level of investment. Figure out what's the right level for you, the right type, which of all of the things that I talked about today are most important for you, because you can't necessarily bite off all of that all at once. And I think that, when you're thinking through that, my mindset that I've seen success with is your budget should be based on staffing and not scope, meaning the key to success is good people. And if you find like good people with this kind of product mindset, in the sense that they know that this digital product is solving a real problem for somebody, either a consumer or a business person who has a job to do, and this product is an asset to them, right? And it's not a nuisance and getting in their way. And I think good people can typically be cross-functional across a lot of these different areas that I talked about today. And I think the other key thing is these good people need to be highly collaborative and not isolated. So this isn't an IT thing or a marketing thing or a product thing. I think forming these highly collaborative cross-functional teams is super important. I also think they need to come together and row in the same direction, meaning there needs to be some decider, like a product manager, who says, this is, with all the signals and all the inputs, this is the play we're going to run. And then everybody kind of gets in line with that and runs that. I think that there needs to be a solid understanding around the why it matters for these people. Why are we doing this? What is, where does this product fit into the world? And finally, just understanding that every product is different. There's, no matter if you're a brand new startup, a single founder who's technical and can build something, or a business person and a technical co-founder startup, or you're venture backed, or you're building digital products inside of enterprise. Everybody's in a different situation. The product is different. The company that's building the product is different. And I think the key is to take some of these ideas today and determine what areas are most important for your product, depending on what your goals and who your audience, et cetera. And so I think determine what resources you need to lead and need to execute in these areas. I think also, in the early days, you certainly can combine these functions, right? Maybe the product manager and the customer success manager are the same people. Maybe there's one engineering team who's working on feature development, fixing bugs, and doing DevOps. Maybe the CEO is doing user support, and all of that is fine. I wanted to spread it apart just to be able to focus on the different areas. But eventually, hopefully, your product grows enough that you can staff a bigger team, and the different folks can specialize and have particular skills in different areas. And so the key point is that you're thinking through all of these essential areas to define success with your product. So some kind of action items that I think about are, one is to determine the staffing model. Are you going to solve these problems with full-time employees, contractors, partners, or a combination? And then finally, I recommend making a plan for at least 6 months. So about 6 to 24 months after launch, thinking these things through, and where it starts on day one after launch and where it is 6 months or 12 months are probably different. So you can evolve the plan over time. So with that, hopefully this was helpful for you folks, just to kind of organize some thoughts. I enjoy sharing these ideas. If anyone has any questions or like to get in touch and just talk about these ideas, I'm more than happy to do that. I included here on the slide my email and my LinkedIn. So with that, thank you.